This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 3rd of March 2020 and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Standard, the scapegoats. In the Star, fighting flares up at Somalia border as Kenya protests. And in the Daily Nation, best weapon to fight dreaded China virus. China virus.
I like that.
So in the Standard, we have the scapegoats, guys.
Yeah, a better headline for this would have been the hatchet men.
Yes, agreed.
Yes, because eventually they will become scapegoats, but they begin as hatchet men. And this story is telling us about the men around the three principals, that is RUTO, Raila, and Uhuru, who were brought in to do very distasteful acts, to speak in rallies and say that Uhuru hawezi achia mwizi hii kazi, and so on and so forth. The personalities include Francis Atwoli, Kipchumba Murkomen, Oscar Sudi, William Kamket on the side of Gideon, Junet Mohammed, Johnston Modama, and so on and so forth. So they're telling us about these characters, what they've been saying in the last 1 year or so in light of BBI. And they're also telling us that they're usually used as political soundboards to gauge the public mood or to create a ground of acceptance when these principles are attempting to create a political scheme. So like when
Morade told us that Uhuru is not going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those kinds of things.
Those kinds of things. The things that the president and Raila cannot tell us.
Yeah, but if we define a scapegoat, that's a person blamed for the wrongdoing or mistakes or faults of others, especially for reasons of expediency. So they quickly take the fall and push it aside.
And so maybe that's why, as Jeremy is saying, eventually they will become scapegoats. I think that is, they're being fattened for that role. But at the moment, I don't think it's particularly accurate.
They will bear the negative brunt, but I'm sure they will be rewarded repeatedly over and over again for these acts of braveness.
That's true.
Absolutely.
So we have a 3-part criteria that we normally use to break down the headlines. We ask ourselves whether it is topical or speculative, whether it is repetitive or groundbreaking, and whether it is thoughtful or just plain lazy. So with the Standard, we've made an edit for the editor. We said it won't be the scapegoats, it will be the hatchet man.
The hatchet man.
These are the fall guys, these are the whipping boys, these are the ones who say the things that need to be said. So in the Star, we are fighting flaring up at Somalia border as Kenya protests. And this is, I guess, a progressing story.
This is a progressing, because so I think what we're seeing now is maybe 4 major things that are happening concurrently. So one, we have, as we mentioned yesterday, the maritime border dispute. We have the former Minister for Security, Abdunar, he fled from Somalia and he is now in Kenya. We have the secret MP meeting that took place in Somalia over the weekend. And then we have increased border fighting. So I think all 4 of these things are taking place at the same time. So what the headline actually talks about is Foreign Affairs sending a protest note to Mogadishu over the secret meeting that the MPs had with the president. And some additional information that came from the Star that I could not verify at the moment is that the MPs were actually invited by the Somali intelligence agency and that the chartered flight that they took was paid for by Mogadishu. And I think those are 2 very critical things that are adding onto this new information as to what actually went on.
So can we say that the trip, were they acting in bad faith? And I think that's the question on everyone's mind, because they didn't alert the Speaker of the National Assembly when they were leaving. They didn't alert Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not Interior, or anybody who might be concerned with security or diplomacy.
These are government officials of the Republic of Kenya. And they've been elected to positions not in the federal government of Somalia, but to the government of Kenya.
But then the question I would have on the flip side, and we spoke about this earlier, could these 11 MPs be with a point? Are they without a point? Because I think that if you look at what is happening, specifically with this former Minister of Security who's hiding out in Kenya, that has caused increased violence on the border, which is now affecting a lot of their constituents. And so their reasoning was, we needed to go possibly to Somalia. Somalia to discuss with the president ways that we can combat this issue. How can we come to an agreement?
But they should have notified the relevant authorities if they were acting in good faith.
Yes, or post-mortem come out and say, listen, this is what we discussed. So they also now need to be clear about what the agenda was. What did they agree? What did they conclude? But you're right. If they're fighting in the northern frontier and your government is acting suboptimally,
what do? You take it upon yourself.
We don't know.
As a government official in the government of Kenya.
Well, we know as 2M said yesterday, they may have gone home.
That is treason. That is treason.
Yes, and you're right, JM. Are they siding with a state that we are at war with, which is also quite dangerous?
They don't have the clear picture of what's happening between Kenya and Somalia. They need to talk about. They need to talk to the Foreign Affairs Ministry,
as elected officials who have a duty to their constituents. If they are not seen to be protecting them, that is also a bad thing for them. I mean, we've talked about secession before. You know, if the whole of the northern frontier decides, the Kenyan government is not for us, let us leave and be our own people.
Exactly. So maybe that was what was on the agenda as well.
Possibly.
Secession matters. Shall we? What do you think about the headline?
Guys, I'm having a change of heart on the Star headline.
You like it?
I'll say this just because of what happened with the Standard. I feel like this headline is misleading and it doesn't give you a full picture. Whereas this one, if I was passing on the street and I saw it, I'd get my dose of the news for the day.
Okay, we can park it.
No, we toss it. Please, guys. That was not convincing.
Not at all?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So in the Daily Nation, we have, interestingly, the Daily Nation has decided to call the coronavirus the China virus.
And they should.
Should they?
Yes.
Well, I've had issues to do with how people are using this as the basis for their xenophobic attacks. But let's talk about the context of the story. So the Daily Nation tells us three things. One, that there's poor access to hygiene information. There's going to be mass panic, or there has been mass panic or misuse of this information, and inadequate preparation by health authorities to deal with the coronavirus. And so there was a statement by the new Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, sort of saying people need to get their facts right, because otherwise we're misleading a lot of people into panic, and that is also going to cause problems for us. But the article also goes to tell us, like for instance, Japan has had 961 cases of confirmed coronavirus cases. However, only 8 people have actually died. And the reason for this low number is because they are highly prepared, firstly, but there's also a high level of civil discipline. So when you are told to quarantine yourself, the Japanese are listening.
Oh, very disciplined.
Right? If you tell a Kenyan to self-quarantine,
they're like, what does that look like? And the thing is, because the mortality rate, yes, is low, it's at 2% or less, so that 80% of those who are actually infected develop mild flu-like symptoms and can actually stay at home and be treated. And then only 14% of people have had those severe symptoms. And only 5% are becoming critically ill. So coronavirus isn't actually a death sentence in itself. And I think that's what this article was sort of putting in.
Absolutely.
And wash your hands.
It's not the way.
Wash your hands. That's the best weapon, actually, they say, is wash your hands and try not to touch your face.
It's not a death sentence the way Ebola is, for example. Two things. First of all, Mutahi Kagwe's entry into the ministry was such a sigh of relief, I think, for all of Kenya. He came in with such huge confidence, and you felt it immediately.
An adult is in charge now.
Precisely. An adult is in charge. It's really a shame for the rest of the cabinet. But the second thing, the way that they've crafted this headline, best weapon to fight dreaded China virus. I don't take issue with the word China there, because this is exactly what the global north
would have done.
This is exactly what China would have talked about. Africa virus. A place of darkness, death, despair, and
so we're giving them a taste of their own medicine.
A taste of their own medicine.
We have to
China virus.
Do we keep
and you know what? There's also a rumor that Africans are immune.
Okay, hold on. Let's not spread fake news. Have you not heard that those spreading fake news is a fine of 5 million shillings?
Let me tell you. This coronavirus is coming with Italians. It is coming with people from China, and that's what the CS also told us. And that is why he said, so people from Europe have to be treated somewhat differently from even Africans coming from there. Anyway.
Dr. JM is in the building.
So who do we give our winning headline?
Well, I think we're giving the winning headline to us.
Yes, the Hatchet Man.
The Hatchet Man.
Goes
from
to
the Standard via the Fifth Estate gives us our winning headline. onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria that we use. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Wow. So in The Star, Ozone has drawn for us is it a bomb?
Yeah. Yes, it's a bomb.
So it's the Somalia spelt out with the O as the bomb. And then it says down there in the newspaper, hot topic, Kenyan MPs in trouble for secret visit. And then up there in the caption it says, where there is smoke,
there is fire.
Yeah. He meant it completely. And here I think, again, he's talking about what's happened with the 11 MPs, but also he is right. Where there is smoke, there is fire.
I think, we're right to assume that something fishy happened, especially, as you said, because they didn't come outright to say this is what we discussed.
What we did.
Something's fishy.
So we pack it or toss it?
Toss that, yeah.
And then Dula of the Daily Nation. So we have a hanging line, I guess, with some combs, some Africa combs, and they say BBI. And we have a caricature of Boni Kalwale. We have one of the president, Uhuru Kenyatta. And then we have Raila Odinga holding the mirror up. And then we have Moses Kuria holding his one hair strand. And we also have Murkomen in his pink shirt looking back. And nobody here needs a comb.
No one needs a comb.
Is this saying nobody's buying BBI?
No, because the caption says, why BBI is a hard sell in sections of Jubilee.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great cartoon because on two levels. One, they're selling this BBI instrument that looks like there's a lack of options, it's take it or leave it.
Yes.
And then the second thing is they're selling a comb to people who don't have hair.
And these are all Tanga MPs, isn't it? And for them, they don't see that there's a problem with the current system. Why would you want to change it when it is our turn?
That's true.
So
satirical. It's a good one.
Very, very clever cartoon.
It is fantastic.
So shall
we park it?
Park it, yes.
All right.
Looking
Consider
good.
Consider what's in the standard.
Okay, so we have Gado, and Gado has drawn for us someone that looks like Magufuli, president of Tanzania, and he's being carried on a throne, and it says, and there's a crowd chanting, "You are the anointed one, no one but you, Magufuli for life." But behind is perhaps the journalist that was recently released being clobbered and beaten by police.
And also, I think he's naked, right?
Yes, and he is naked. So again, from the emperor's new clothes, no one is willing to tell the king that he is naked.
The thing for me with this cartoon is that there was nothing that actually triggered it. So I think it's a bit out of date because the journalist you're talking about, Kamendera, he was freed on the 24th of February. So this was maybe about a week ago. So I feel like this cartoon is late.
A bit dated.
Also, 2M and I have fully drank the Magufuli Kool-Aid. We are his followers.
About to say that.
I think there's a very high cost for development, and freedom is expensive.
Getting stuff done.
So I think that the people need to understand that sometimes the ends justify the means. I think Magufuli has a great plan for the country. I don't want to sound like I'm...
I gave a story a few weeks ago about how there was a journalist in Botswana who aggressed Kagame in that country, telling him you've got such a terrible human rights record that people don't love you. And he asked, and Kagame asked the journalist, have you ever visited Rwanda? Like, have you visited before you start talking like this? And you know what? And he said, no, actually I haven't. And the truth is, for most of us, if we visit Tanzania, as you're saying, you drank the Kool-Aid. But I'm sure, you saw it with your own eyes.
I did.
And you were convinced about what he's doing.
As I went in, I really had that Western NGO mentality, like I'm going into a third world country. And you land and you see that it's a thriving economy. It's a thriving country that people are happy.
These are the benefits of a little less democracy. A little bit more autocracy in a country will give you results very quickly.
Fantastic.
And that's what's happening in Tanzania.
However, I think for being out
very pessimistic.
Very pessimistic it is, indeed.
And late, out of time.
Very out of time. So I think on that regard, it just...
So do we have our winning cartoon from Dula?
I think we do.
Of the Daily Nation. Yes. What is our final thought?
And now our final thought, in continuation of with the theme of this week, looking at political strategy. Yesterday we looked at Abraham Lincoln and his political genius. Today we continue with looking at Catherine the Great, Portrait of a Woman, written by Robert Massey in 2011. So in this biography, another Pulitzer Prize winner, Robert Massey, gives us the portrait of one person, one who happens to have been a woman and who happens to have been the Empress of Russia for more than 30 years in the late 1700s. And this was Catherine the Great, also known as Catherine II. So her life is the story of an obscure German princess who became one of the most remarkable, powerful, and captivating women in history. So she was born into a minor noble family. She transformed herself into the Empress of Russia just through sheer determination. For 34 years, the government, foreign policy, cultural development, and welfare of Russian people were in her hands. And she dealt with domestic rebellion, foreign wars, and the wave of political change that came through the consequences of the French Revolution. At this time, they were an absolute monarch, and you have your neighbor next door, you know, uprising, saying that we do not want a monarch anymore. So she was forced into an arranged marriage at the age of 16 to her second cousin. He was Peter III of the Russian royal family. Catherine was miserable from the start, having to deal with his very immature and alcoholic ways. They say that he would play with toy soldiers for hours on end. But she quickly worked to eliminate every trace of her German origins to become truly Russian. And this is a mistake that her husband failed to learn, because he was Russian, but he came of German origin. So before her, Russia was ruled by the Empress Elizabeth, whose 20-year reign greatly stabilized the monarchy. But when Elizabeth died on Christmas Day 1761, Peter took over the throne and immediately ended Russia's war with Prussia, which angered the nobility and the monarchy. And Peter was German and he could barely speak any Russian, and he pursued a very strong Prussia, with Prussia at the time is what we know now as Germany. He pursued a strongly Prussian policy which made him very unpopular. So Peter became emperor in 1762, but 6 months later, this woman, Catherine II, she led a coup with the regiments into St. Petersburg, and she proclaimed herself Empress of Russia, and he later abdicated and was assassinated 8 days later. That's a conspiracy that's part of that story. But on the final page of the book, Massey makes the argument that Catherine was the greatest monarch of her era, and it's very easy to see why. He writes that the men before her, you have Peter the Great, they imported technology and government institutions into Russia. But Catherine brought to Europe morality, political and judicial philosophy, literature, art, architecture, sculpture, medicine, and education. And she modernized Russia in a way that is still seen over 250 years later. So she created the Hermitage Palace, which is in St. Petersburg, and its original art collection. Today, it contains the largest art collection in the world, and it is considered one of the great art museums ever. She magnified the power of Russia and advanced the nation towards a culture that during the century within when she was in power and thereafter, we see the production of Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, and so many more of these artists and great thinkers. Yet all these accomplishments are not actually the focus of this book. In this book, he really looks at Catherine as an individual and, you know, understanding how she thought, what made her tick, what made her a great leader. Fascinating book.
So you're saying if we go to St. Petersburg, we must go to Hermitage Palace.
Exactly, we must.
Fantastic.
I really enjoyed this book, and I really love Catherine the Great.
You do.
I think she's like my hero. Girl crush.
Why? Because she killed her husband.
Because she had a whole coup against her husband. Anyway,
within 6 months.
That's for another day. But however, so Catherine, while being married to Peter and detesting him, turned to her books to escape. So this is where she learned French and all these French philosophers. But also she developed her philosophy of rule. In fact, she really admired Voltaire, and he admired her back.
They used to write letters to each other.
Exactly. In fact, Voltaire called her style the benevolent despotism. So basically, he praised her authoritarian style and mocked the extravagance of other French counterparts, her other French counterparts. So Catherine assumes power through a coup, and she literally had the help of her husband's most trusted generals, which also is quite cheeky. But she saw a way in which to manipulate them and see that she was the right woman for the job, right? And she governed at a time when it's called the golden age of Russia. So Russia is coming into enlightenment, what you're saying about science, the arts and philosophy and all those things, and military. And she's incredible because she really thought, okay, my enemies don't have to remain my enemies. And I think that's what she did really well. So on ascending to the throne, she was clever enough to win the allegiance and service of her former opponents. And this is something we learned Genghis Khan did as well. So when he conquered an area in his empire, he co-opted his former opponents.
And Abraham Lincoln yesterday, team of rivals, he co-opted
as well.
Rivals.
And in this being magnanimous, she was able to get her former opponents to not retaliate against her to solidify her power. So even though she was strict and very despotic at times, when generals would try and take credit for putting her in power, so one of them I think is the Olive brothers, who was one of the brothers is actually one of her lovers.
Yes.
And Potemkin and all those guys, she would say to them, I owe my accession to God and the will of my people. And she would be very clear to make sure that you knew that you were not the author of her success.
Yes.
She was very much there by her own right. Yeah. And so she realized coronation was going to be a very important part of this journey, the beginning of her journey. This is where she would make the pact between God and herself. And so Catherine says, okay, I'm going to get crowned or be coronated in Moscow, which is the holy city for Russia.
Yes.
It is where all the Tsars and empresses had been
crowned before.
So for her, it was really important. But more importantly, it was a moment for her to gain more favor. She was able to give titles, honors, and gift the subjects who would continue to be loyal to her. So there are many challenges she faced really quickly. One of them was a financial crisis because Russia had been in a war for about 7 years.
Yeah, the 7-year war.
And so the first thing she had to do was call the troops back home, which was something I think Peter III was struggling to do, to call all the troops back home. The second thing was Peter III had declared that church property was now state property.
Yes.
But she needed to gain favor with the church. So she decided she was going to overturn that and give the churches back their property. However, she then realizes this can't make any sense because the church owns a lot of property and by virtue of that owns a lot of serfs. Serfs were the lowest social worker in the feudal system. And they paid their taxes to the church and not the state. So we are in a broke Russia. She needs to solidify her power and she needs money to do that. So she then reverses back and says, okay, by 1764, I think, she says the church, all the ecclesiastical properties will now come back to the state. And everything the church would get in taxes now comes to the state. So the church lost its economic base, but she gained supremacy over the church, which I think was really interesting. And then the other thing she did was she didn't distinguish between her personal interests and the national interest. So if the state was broke, she was broke as well. So she ended up relinquishing her allowance, her imperial allowance, so that it went to the state. Because at that point, price of grain had gone up and all those things. So she was very...
pragmatic,
philanthropic, and got stuff done. But she also realized what she needed to gain favor because she wasn't a direct descendant. Most people thought it should have been her son who she was holding fort for till he was old enough.
And even then, there's questions about whether her son was actually Peter's son, her husband's son.
Yes.
She was really a success in terms of a leader, a monarch. She observed every single rule, I think, of what it takes to run a state, to keep your state stable, all the rules of the 48 laws of power. I mean, she was just, she's a great example for rulership. Now, one of the lovers you mentioned in passing was a guy called Grigory Potemkin. Potemkin was one of her, I think, foremost greatest lovers. She had a very soft spot for him, and he really kept her happy. And so, to reward him, she sent him to govern a place called Crimea. And this is in like 1780s. And so in 1787, she sets out on a tour of Crimea, which she had acquired about 5 years before that. And the idea was to be accompanied by Western dignitaries whom she hoped to influence so that they could, and impress, so that they could back her for a war that she was going to start very soon with the Ottoman Empire. So Potemkin prepares months on end, apparently. But legend has it that Potemkin sought to amaze the visiting dignitaries as well as Catherine with a series of these pristine villages in Crimea.
Yeah.
But there was just one problem, the book says. The villages were not really that clean. They didn't exist actually at all. So, according to popular myth, Potemkin simply constructed facades of glittering new villages along the river route. But in the distance, they were, they seemed awe-inspiring. But up close, the prosperous villages shown to the empress and the visitors were said to have been made of painted cardboard.
Oh my days.
The happy villagers were declared to be costumed serfs, marched from place to place, appearing and reappearing, waving and cheering as Catherine and her visitors passed by.
So they go from one village and then run to the next village?
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Yeah. You know, with cardboard facades. So, and the book says, while historians dispute whether that actually happened, the term stuck. So we now know a Potemkin village to refer to a facade, whether literal or figurative, constructed to conceal an underlying shabbiness. They're meant to look good to outsiders who only gaze in their direction for a short period of time. And when you go away, the facade collapses and the rot is revealed.
Oh gosh. Wow.
So this is a very popular myth that came out of the end of Catherine the Great's stay in office.
Yeah.
And nowadays that's a term that is widely used. Potemkin villages.
Fantastic.
Put it on a
nice
sham.
new term.
Wonder if we can spot some in Kenya.
All around us.
However, I was thinking with some of the things we've spoken today, does that not explain the handshake now?
Yeah.
Co-opting your enemies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that you can get what you want
Get
done.
what you want.
Yeah. So on a day where we had our winning headline, The Hatchet Men, and where we have a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation, I want to leave you with a statement that Catherine the Great made. She said, "I shall be an autocrat. That's my trade. And the good Lord will forgive me. That's his." So kindly subscribe, right? Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel, but find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a good evening.